Deputy David Cullinane.
Ministers, we first need to acknowledge a very simple truth, that your government has no mandate. The policies you will implement in terms of current and capital expenditure, in terms of public sector recruitment and pay, are policies that were roundly rejected by the electorate. They do not even have the support of a majority of people in this House. And your role as ministers derives not from the people, but from the Fianna Fáil members who sit opposite you in this chamber. And yet this is called new politics. Ministers, new politics has to mean new policies. It has to be about changing direction. It has to mean a departure from the old. I am positive about Ireland's future, but only if we make the right choices. And we all know, Ministers, that political choices are down to us as politicians, and it is us that can make those choices. We can choose to give tax cuts to the wealthy, or we can invest in public services. We can choose to protect the top 14% income earners, or we can invest in our hospitals and our schools. We can choose to build houses and sustainable communities in the here and now, or pretend that we are putting money away for a rainy day. The choices set out in this summer economic statement failed the fairness test, yet again by Fine Gael and this government. We need to move away from the very narrow view that the Irish people exist to serve the economy, when in fact it should be the opposite. Can I present you, Ministers, with the figures from the Stability Programme update, which underpin the summer economic statement, and which show total government revenues as a percentage of GDP dropping from 2017 to 2021, and total expenditure as a percentage of GDP dropping during the same period. And while these figures now will need to be adjusted, your statement does so in a disingenuous way, because in your statement, Minister, you talk about state-backed capital investment as a percentage of GNP and not state investment as a percentage of GDP. When you factor in the figures, we can see that as the economy grows, the government is raising less and spending less as a percentage of GDP. This Fine Gael independent government, propped up by Fianna Fáil, is actively shrinking the state, while issuing press releases that this is about building for the future. These are policies that would make even the British Tory party blush. What can we say about the projections in the summer economic statement and the policies that your government is ready to impose on the Irish people? It means more pressure on our health system, more patients lying in hospital trolleys, more band-aid solutions, more missed targets as impossible budgets are allocated to hospitals in order to force the increased privatisation of the system. It means more pressure on our education system that is already running at under capacity, even before the demographic pressures and international standards and classroom sizes are factored in. It means more pressure on housing and infrastructure as communities and businesses grow, but have to do so within reduced capacity. Minister, capital investment is one of the key issues. Indeed, going forward, possibly the key issue that we are faced with today. When we think about capital investment, we usually think of roads, of infrastructure, of the mechanisms that facilitate trade and business activity. But capital investment, of course, is also houses. It is also health. It is also education. Usually when these issues are raised in the public debate, they are talked about as expenditure, as a cost, as if housing serves the same social and economic purpose as shopping online. It does not. When we build houses, Minister, when we increase capacity in our health service, when we lower class sizes, we are investing in our future. Minister, that is the big difference between building an economy and building a society. This is why, after 9 years of chronic underinvestment in these areas, after the bank bailout of Fianna Fáil and the unequal austerity measures of Fine Gael and Labour, that we have in Ireland today a chorus of diverse voices, all calling for the same thing: public investment in social and economic infrastructure. We hear it from IBEC, who in a briefing last week said that the current fiscal rules should take on board the unique demographic pressures we face and the associated need for capital investment. It said that Ireland had access to the cheapest money in history and should be able to borrow to spend on badly needed infrastructure. This is IBEC saying this, who then went on to say that it was unconcerned about the associated rise in national debt as capital investment taps into a wider economic approach. We leave to one side my astonishment at IBEC suddenly advocating public investment after being supply-side cheerleaders for so long. But on this issue, Minister, IBEC is right. The Irish Congress of Trade Unions has also called for greater investment over tax cuts for the elites, for the wealthy and for the top 14%. Patricia King said recently that investing in quality public services like health and education will boost economic growth, achieve a better quality of life for all citizens and help create a more equal society. She said that these services should be funded through a system of fair and progressive taxation, and in this she is correct. We had the European Commission calling for greater capital investment. It said in its country report in February of this year, and I quote, "The current levels of capital expenditure in Ireland today are barely sufficient to replace the existing stock of public capital, and that," again I quote, "Ireland is now witnessing the emergence of capacity constraints in public infrastructure." Now, they have no confidence, Minister, that we are investing correctly in capital investment. So this is not news to the people of Ireland, Minister. When Fine Gael took it upon itself, very foolishly, in the last election to tell the people to keep the recovery going, it got a very harsh lesson in what happens when you believe your own spin and when you believe your own bluster. Yes, there has been a modest recovery, and we recognise that. But the reality is that the vast majority of Irish households don't feel it because it is not in their wages, it is not in the services. There are more people working, yes, but many are working in low-paid jobs with high social cost overheads. You said in your speech earlier, Minister, that the previous government's approach to expenditure reductions was a targeted one. And how right you are. The top 14% were cosseted, were protected. Not 1 cent of extra income tax was sought from them. But yet those who rely on our public services, those who rely on our hospitals and our schools, those people who are now on hospital trolleys, those people, those 2,000 children who are now sleeping in emergency accommodation, are victims of your targeted approach, Minister, which was cut after cut after cut in public services, and now people are seeing the true cost of that. We live in a state where essential public services have been downgraded or privatised in order to pay for the tax breaks for high earners and to provide investment opportunities for private corporations in waste and health and education, housing and water. After 2018, the government is going to start saving for a rainy day, or so the spin goes. How many families have to be put up in hotels for the government to see that for many families it is raining, and raining very, very heavy, Minister? I now want to turn to public sector pay and pensions. As the Minister is well aware, the FEMPI Acts do need to be unwound. This process has begun under the Lansdowne Road Agreement, which runs out in 2018. A new collective agreement would need to be put in place to finally shut down FEMPI, yet there is no recognition of this in the summer statement. Not one single mention of what happens post-2018, except for the establishment of this commission, Minister, that will make recommendations. Now, when I questioned you yesterday on this, you said that it is not your job to preempt any possible new collective agreement to replace Lansdowne Road, especially as that would be a bad negotiating strategy. Can I ask, Minister, what type of strategy is it that says that you are working out a new pay deal? When working out a new pay deal, you will put $1 billion a year on the table, not once, not twice, but 3 times, to put away for a rainy day, but no provision at all for increased public sector pay or for pay restoration. What type of strategy is it where you argue for the continuation of economic emergency legislation by announcing $5 billion in tax cuts over 5 years because, as you say, the emergency is over? This government has just announced over $8 billion in tax cuts and unspent revenue over the next 5 years, but says this will have no influence on its negotiating position with public sector unions. I can imagine public sector unions scratching their heads at such a strategy. And astonishingly, the statement itself makes no provision or no reference to pay equalisation in the statement. You do make passing reference to it, Minister, in your speech here today. No longer can this state, Minister, stand over a 2-tier pay structure in the public service. No longer can that soar in classrooms and in hospitals continue. If you believe in the principle of equal pay for equal work, then you have a responsibility to deal with this issue, and yet no mention whatsoever of that in this statement. Minister, we recognise that provisions have to be made for the winding down of FEMPI. Sinn Féin's recent Ardèche recognised that public service workers play a vital role in our society. Yet many of the newer entrants have been penalised by the two-tier pay structure brought in by the last Fine Gael Labour government. Sinn Féin will continue to support the demand that this unfair two-tier system be replaced with a fairer system that rewards people based on their work and that it is not defined by when they begin their career. It is Sinn Féin's view that FEMPI needs to be unwound in a fair and equitable and structured way, with emphasis on low to middle income workers before those on over 65,000 who are already due to receive significant elements of pay restoration under the Lansdowne Road Agreement due to the unwinding of the Haddington Road Agreement. On a deeper note, Minister, there is an intentional sleight of hand here in the figures which have been presented. For the years 2017 and 18, the net fiscal space is exclusive of public sector pay restoration. However, for the years 2019, 2020 and 2021, no provision is made for future pay restoration. Minister, this is not net fiscal space for those 3 years. It is in fact a sleight of hand and an attempt to make the figures look rosier than they actually are. You have to be straight with people, Minister. You have to be clear to public sector workers. You have to give them hope that you are going to do the right thing, and to give them hope that in 2019, 20 and 21 there will be further restoration for those on low and middle incomes in the public sector. And you know that to be a reality, but you have left it out of this because you wanted to distort the figures and have a pretence that this was net fiscal space when in reality it is not. Finally, Minister, it has to be pointed out that government's policies, as outlined in the summer economic statement, are extremely short-sighted as well as ideological. The Minister and his government is committed to shrinking public services, to tax cuts for the higher earners, for the top 14% and for the elites, and is committed to outsourcing as much of the state as he possibly can. And he does it with a smile, and he does it very well, but it is his intention nonetheless. In Sinn Féin we stand against all of this, and we stand with the ordinary people of Ireland. We stand with low to middle income workers, 77% of whom earn less than €50,000 a year. There are alternatives, Minister. We in Sinn Féin put forward every single year costed, fair and deliverable alternatives. We publish policy documents on childcare, on housing, on health. We are the only party that has set out a costed route to a genuinely universal health system. Others talk about it. We've costed it, Minister, and we've set a strategy out that would lead us to a fair, equitable health service for the first time. Sinn Féin holds the fundamental belief that inability to pay should not deny access nor the opportunity to lead a full, long and healthy life. In order to have universal health care, we need to increase capacity in the system and progressively replace private spending by members of the public with public spending. Sinn Féin believes that one of the fundamental rights in any society is the right to a home, and that is why in our election manifesto we committed ourselves to building 100,000 social and affordable homes. And that's what needs to happen, Minister. I've seen an awful lot of spin since the election from this current government about what they may or may not do in relation to housing. What people outside this chamber need is real action, and not rhetoric, not more false promises, but action. And I don't see that reflected in this statement, Minister. I'll start it as I finish. New politics is old wine in new bottles unless it means new policies and a change of course. You, Minister, talk about new politics. You say you want to listen to us on this side of the chamber, but yet what we see before us, mapped out for the next 5 years, is more of the same neoliberal economic policies, more of the same tax cuts for those at the top who don't need it, and for those who depend on public services, for those on trolleys, for those in emergency accommodation, for those living in poverty, no real hope, Minister. We in Sinn Féin provide that hope, and I don't believe that what's been presented to us today is the fair way to manage our economy over the next 5 years. Gurr Margaret.